Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Ashley Nicole, a health scientist and the founder of BeReleafed. I'm really excited about today's conversation because we're exploring something that's at the heart of our upcoming event: how movement, mindset, and body awareness can support real healing and transformation. As someone with a background in health science, I'm always fascinated by the connection between our nervous system, our emotional well being, and physical movement. Research continues to show us that the way we move, the way that we think and regulate stress plays a major role in our overall vitality and mental clarity. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Karys, and also known as the I Can Queen. She is an international law of attraction and empowerment coach, a thought leader, and motivational speaker who has been helping women step into their most confident, empowered, and magnetic selves for years. After moving from a small town in Wales to Sydney, Australia, in pursuit of her dream life, Karis experienced burnout, uh, the ultimately burnout that ultimately led her on a powerful journey of self discovery. Through dance, personal growth, and the law of attraction, she rebuilt her confidence and discovered her purpose. Today, she helps women reignite their spark and step into their power through her can method. Karis will also be joining us as a speaker at our upcoming event. It is called Be Relieved in Motion, the healing power of movement. So I'm really excited for this conversation. Karis, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to get into it and excited for the event.
Yes, me too. So I guess, Karis, to start us off, can you share a little about your journey and what led you from Wales to Australia and ultimately into helping women step into their confidence and power?
Yes, so I'm glad you asked. I was from a small town in Wales. If anyone doesn't know where that is, it's in the United Kingdom next to England. And I lived there my whole entire life. It's a very, very small town. I lived there with my husband. We had just got married. We had a house. We had a cat. We were like as settled at it as you could be, really. We had great government jobs, but there was just something inside of us that was like, is this all life is about? We were kind of
Mhm.
going to work and then just going out on the weekend and resetting and going to work again. And it just felt like we were kind of in this Groundhog Day reality.
Mhm.
And we actually came to Australia on our honeymoon. And we had decided because we were at the age of cut-off time for coming to Australia on a working holiday visa. We were 29 and you could only come before you were 30. So we just said, shall we try it out for 6 months? I mean, we can just come back. What's the worst that can happen, We'll
Mhm.
just up and leave. So we put our house up for rent. We our cat went with it actually with the tenants.
Oh.
And he stayed there. And yeah, we packed our bags and kind of left the UK. And I think a couple of months before I left, I had just qualified to become a turned up fitness instructor, which is a female empowerment dance fitness program. And it had really ignited this like passion inside me to just help and empower women
Mhm.
through dance, right? And as a child, I'd loved dancing, and it really reignited that like confidence within myself.
Yeah.
Because quite honestly, like up until then, I'd been really self-conscious, body
Mhm.
conscious. I definitely had body dysmorphia for years and years
Mhm.
before I started that. And so, yeah, I came to Australia with this kind of dream to, just do something completely different when I was there and help change women's lives
Yes.
and empower them through dance and just kind of become a dancer, have a completely different life. And when we arrived to Australia, 2 weeks later, the borders closed for COVID. So we were kind of trapped in for 2 years.
Oh my God.
Um, and within that time, obviously there was no dancing happening. COVID had everyone locked down. So I fell back into corporate world and into a project management role in government. And I found myself 2.5 years in feeling so burnt out. Like I'm wondering why I was even over the other side of the world. And so that was kind of the turning point for me to actually think, what is gonna light me up inside? What is going to make me feel like I'm living in my purpose? And so through a load of self-discovery, gosh, I was there for around 2 years, 2.5 years, playing with law of attraction, but it eventually led me to coaching. And yeah, ever since I have just been helping women step into their most confident, empowered selves, realize that they have the power to create their own reality and to get them really clear on what that reality is, like what that dream looks like, and get them to actually take the brave steps to create their dream life.
That's amazing. That's a great story. And I feel like I relate to that too. I love dance as well. And I've been doing it since a child. I just love the freedom and flexibility of dancing. And I just feel a difference from when I first start dancing to after. And I feel like my confidence grows. If I have
Yeah.
a little bit of a lower confidence, I can dance and feel that confidence kind of come back, you know?
Yes,
And I just
definitely.
yeah, I just love that story because I feel like so many people like reach a point of burnout or a point of I don't know or I don't really see the benefit of it before they actually realize that there's something deeper that needs to shift. I
Hmm.
think for me, from a health science perspective, like we know that chronic stress and burnout does impact the nervous system and your hormones. So, rediscovering movement and purpose can actually help the body rebalance in a way, right?
Yeah. And I think dance is so underestimated in terms of how powerful it is. One, for your confidence,
Hmm.
one, for actually what it does to your body. And there's actually so many studies out there now that put dance up there as one of the top things to fight depression and anxiety. So
Hmm.
I really think it is one of those things. Genuinely think the world would be a happier place if more people just danced.
Yeah, me too. I agree with that. I know you just mentioned it, but you often do talk about rediscovering your confidence through dance, right? How
Mm.
did movement become such a powerful tool for rebuilding your self belief or your confidence?
Yes, I think when I discovered that dance fitness class, Turned Up Fitness, for years
Mhm.
I'd stopped dancing, to be honest,
Mm.
and kind of lost that part of myself.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I was definitely in a place of feeling really self-conscious and body conscious. And when I went to this dance class, it is in a low lit studio, like a
Mm.
nightclub with like flashing lights going off.
Yeah.
And the energy in there is just electric. And the
Mhm.
second that I stepped into there, and it is a class that's all about stepping into your womanhood and your like sexy, sassy, confident version of you. So
Yeah.
it kind of reignites your inner Beyonce and
Mhm.
it gets you to actually like touch your body
Yeah.
in a way that you've probably never touched it before. And to be
Mhm.
honest, a way you've never moved your body before.
Yeah.
So for me, it not only allowed me to actually feel comfortable touching my body and like feeling like, oh, I love my body now. It actually
Mhm.
does so much for me. It is a vessel rather than something to be looked at and admired by other people. Like this is actually my vessel
Mhm.
and allowed me to feel this sense of freedom and like from perfectionism. I had been a perfectionist my whole life, and
Yeah.
this class is so fast paced that you haven't got time to be perfect.
You're right.
You have to just like throw yourself around and
Mhm.
get down on the floor and you're like, whoo, before you know it, you like the hour's over and you just feel elated.
Mhm.
And yeah, for me, igniting that within myself and like it touched me so deeply that I actually remember one time like getting really upset with how much love I had for my body
Mm,
because before that I really didn't.
mm,
And just seeing women now when they show up to my classes and show up feeling that stress and tension from the work week and then they leave feeling like on top of the world. They
mhm,
go, oh, you're great now. And you can't sleep, to be totally honest with you, because it's
mm,
that high energy. But just seeing how women have gone from feeling really self-conscious and, you know, in a state of, to be perfectly honest, like really low self-esteem. One
mm,
of my class members used to come with panic attacks.
mm,
She would have to sit out at the back because she was
mm,
like had such bad social anxiety. And then I actually coached her. And through that coaching program, she became so confident that she wanted to become an instructor. So I trained her
mm,
to become an instructor. And now she is like teaching classes in front of 20 odd women, like the most confident Beyonce queen you've ever seen. And just seeing her go from there, like panic attacks,
yeah.
like anxiety around people, social anxiety. She didn't want to go to work. Like she would get really anxious in every social situation to like where she is now. It's like two completely different people. And
Mm,
it was dance the spark that, as
yeah,
well as obviously powerful coaching tools, but the
for sure.
dance and the body and connecting you back to the true you, which is that younger you who
Hmm.
loved to dance and be free and sing and dance in her bedroom. Like that's the real you. And so when you can connect back to her, you can really step into the true you and your true inner confidence that has always been there.
I agree. I really agree with that. It actually reminds me of pole dance fitness. When I first decided to do it, it was so against like my norm. And I was that shy person, which is opposite of how I present myself like to the world. I'm a very confident person. But that day, my first day going in, I was just like in towards the back. They told us to wear shorts and I have on like leggings. They told us to wear like a nice cute bralette and I have on a tank top. So I was very reserved. And I remember just leaving feeling so empowered. Like I think like how you said, even with just like touching your body differently or just activating that sensual energy just for yourself was so powerful.
Mm.
I think that connection between movement and confidence is quite fascinating. I
Yeah.
guess physiologically, like movement stimulates neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, which plays a major role in like your mood, motivation, and emotional resilience. So I think about that on my own journey, just like, wow, it did stimulate those neurotransmitters. I was able to have more energy. I was more balanced in my hormones. My mood was very uplifting. I'm motivated to go, to work out, and just motivated to just embrace my feminine energy. I guess
Yes.
when you experience this, like I know that you're known for teaching the law of attraction, right? And your can method. How does mindset influence the way people show up in their bodies and in their lives? 'Cause I know for me, that was a major struggle.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think particularly mindset is the starting point, to be honest. I think you're either a lot of my clients will come to me being so in their head, right? That's
Okay,
where they're stuck right now,
that's
is
me.
just going around in these circles. It was me, to be honest, for years.
Mhm.
So just going around in these circles in your head, overthinking everything, being a perfectionist, procrastinating then because there's so many thoughts that you don't know which one to take action on. And it is genuinely like the main state that people come to me in and say, I really want to get rid of this busy mind and get some clarity on what I want to create and actually just do it. And
Mm,
so movement is the way that you can switch this off, right?
Mm.
You're either in your body or you're in your head. You
Yeah.
can't, like, it's really difficult to be in both at the same time.
Right.
So moving your body shifts this like in an instant. If you just put on one of your favorite songs and start dancing, you've forgotten what you've even been thinking about. But at the same time, your mind is the controller, right? Well, a lot of people think your mind is the controller of you, like, and you are your thoughts.
Hmm.
But you are not your thoughts. Your
Hmm.
thoughts are just, I like to think of them, they're like clouds, but they are things that come in, like say hi, and then float away again. They are not you, they're not part of you. And so when you can recognize, they're just a part of you, like they're not you as a whole, because you can watch your thoughts. So if you
Hmm.
can watch your thoughts, that means you are not your thoughts, you're way beyond
Good
that.
point. Hmm.
Mm. So one great little tip to like give your give your mind some space is to ask yourself, I wonder what my next thought will be.
Hmm.
And then you just look and wait for the thought. And normally it doesn't come for a little while. You've got that gap in thinking. And that tip is from one of my favorite books, The Power of Now. And yeah, it is a great, great book to get you out of your mind and into your kind of consciousness. But as
Hmm.
soon as you recognize that your mind is not you, you can start to rewire it and
Hmm.
start to change up some switches. So if you've got a thought in your head that isn't a helpful one, right?
Hmm.
What like a worry thought, for example, you can pick that out and say, actually, is that what I want? And this is what the law of attraction tells you. Stop thinking about what you don't want and talking about what you don't want and just think and talk about what you do want.
Hmm.
So it's like picking that thought out. Is that what I actually want? And then if the answer is no, I'll say, thank you, thought, for showing me what I don't want. What do I actually want?
Hmm.
And maybe what it is, like, I hope I don't fail this exam, for example. Like, all the energy is going into fail the exam, fail the exam. Your brain is is taking on that message. Your subconscious mind is going, fail the exam, fail the exam.
Hmm.
Instead of saying, I can't wait to pass this exam with flying colors. And even just saying that sentence makes you feel so much better in yourself. Your body starts to loosen. Instead of your mind controlling, you're the feelings, you got hunched up, you're like, oh, I hope I don't fail this exam. I can't wait to pass this exam with flying colors. Your mind and body are so, so connected. So in both ways, right?
Hmm.
Even like your thoughts can control what your body does. In the
Hmm.
same way, your body can give your mind that boost of confidence in the same sentence, which is why dance is so, so powerful because you can step into this like bold, shoulders back, chin up, chest out, boobies out, right? This confident state and start strutting down the street, and all of a sudden, your mind's like, I've got this. I'm super
Yeah.
confident. So, yeah, they're definitely both really intertwined.
Yeah. I think what I get from that too, like what's interesting is that the mindset isn't just psychological, right? It's biological. And
Yes.
our thoughts, like you mentioned, um, can influence the stress hormones or our nervous system regulation and even how our bodies respond to movement, but we can choose better. We can make a
Yes.
decision not to have that overcome us and our decisions.
Mm.
Now, I know you mentioned that you experienced burnout before stepping into your purpose in a way. What were the biggest lessons you learned during that period of basically rebuilding your life?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. And for me, in that stage of burnout, I really vividly remember calling EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, in my work and sitting on my lawn on this gorgeous apartment that was overlooking Sydney Harbour that I had manifested, right? I had
Oh,
manifested this gorgeous beachfront apartment and I just was so unhappy. The
mm,
apartment was lovely, but what I was doing for the majority of my time was really not making me happy. And I was in tears on the phone to this EAP counselor, and he was the one who got me to think about what would you do if money was not a factor? What would you
Mhm.
be doing if money was not a factor? And I vividly remember my response was, I would be helping people.
Mhm.
And that's all I could think of at the time. I would be helping people. And so that kind of stayed with me.
Mhm.
And it was my starting point. I lost that job, thankfully. It's the best thing that could have happened to me. I lost that job in government, and I actually just took 3 months off work completely. And in that time, it was so much self-discovery, as
Mhm.
in spending time by myself, which, to be honest, I'd never liked to do in the past. Before I
Mhm.
moved to Australia, I would hate spending time by myself. In my busy mind, it would be the worst place I could ever be. So instead of just distracting myself all the time, I would consciously bring myself back to me
Mhm.
and do so much journaling, so much self-development, meditation,
Mhm.
kind of really, really coming back to what I liked at the root, going back to what I liked to do as a child, what used to
Mhm.
light me up. What have I been really good at in all my jobs? What do people start to like? What do people always say that I'm good at? And really getting into this kind of deep self-discovery method, which took a long time, to be honest, to come to that I wanted to be a coach. So my
Mhm.
biggest advice to someone who's gone through that burnout and feels really lost and unclear is to get some support, get some help. Like that initial call with the counselor was what even took me in that direction. So that was a great start, just speaking to somebody. But if you
Mhm.
have someone who's a coach who has been where you've been already, and knows how to get you there in honestly, sometimes like less than an hour call. We've got a clear plan on where they want to head. And it's just been hiding in the background for so long. So I think definitely my like one of my biggest pieces of advice is stop asking for the answers outside of yourself and go inwards, but at the same time get some support from someone who can ask you the right questions to speed up time and get you there quicker.
For sure. I agree with that as well. I believe everyone needs a coach at some point in their life. And I believe every coach needs a coach. For you to be a
Yes.
great coach, most likely you've had a coach as well. It just really
Yeah.
helps to have someone, like you said, that has gone through what you've gone through and are on the other side and can give you some tools that you can implement to get you to your journey. And it's just a fantastic experience. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help and asking for resources because just like you, other people as well want to just help. It's going to help out as much as possible. So I definitely
Yeah.
relate to that as well.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned about your can method. Can you tell us
Mhm.
more about that and how it helps women step into their most, let's say, magnetic and empowered selves?
Yes. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
So it is the methodology that I've taken every single one of my clients through, okay? And so it's been crafted really carefully over the past few years, seeing women in that same state when they come to me feeling really unclear, burnt out, but unsure of their direction, and a lot of the time just in their minds. So the
Mhm.
first step of the Can method is to get clarity. So the C is for clarity, to get really, really clear on what you want your life to look like. Okay,
Mhm.
know what society should be telling you to do, what your parents have told you to do, what you actually want to do. Okay, what
Mhm.
feels good in your heart. And usually women have had this dream that has been niggling in the back of their minds for a while, and they just keep taking a lot of effort to say, go away, I can't do that. Okay, so it's kind of bringing that to the forefront and getting really clear on what that looks like, feels like, and would be like when you were in there, okay?
Mhm.
Then you want to align with your authentic self. So this is where you like I mentioned earlier, really get in touch with who you are, your passions, what you're good at, like what lights you up inside, what really takes the energy away from you. Really getting so clear on who you are as a person that if somebody was standing in the airport with a blank sign and they didn't have your name, it was your taxi driver to take you to this gorgeous five-star resort, and they just had a full description of you. This could not be denied for anyone else. It's only you. So it's like you a full description of who you are, what you love to do, what you don't like to do, your little unique quirks, things that make you you, things that people love you for, your values, all of that good stuff. So really getting clear on you. The
Mhm.
next part is one of my favorite bits, and that's saying no to negative Nancy. So this is the part of your brain, the little chatterbox, it's like the
Mhm.
devil on your shoulder, it's telling you, you can't do that, you're not good enough for this, da-di-da-di-da-di-da. And it's a real shock to honestly most of my clients that everyone has this. For some reason, they think it's only them, but we all have this internal chatterbox, negative Nancy, the voice that is telling you can't when we need to tell it we can, right? And recognizing again, we can, we can.
Mhm.
And recognizing that that's not you and really actually giving that part of you, because it is a part of you still, but
Right.
recognizing it as like one of your old aunts who loves you, but she's just quite old and she doesn't really know, like you feel a bit sorry for her because you've got to give her some compassion because she's a bit older. She doesn't quite understand what's going on in the world right now.
Right.
But giving that part of you like a little character. So it differentiates it between who you truly are, like your truest, confident, highest self, and,
Mhm.
and putting it in the corner and something that makes you giggle as well is quite good. So give it a name that makes you giggle, right? We've had some of my clients have come up with some great names. Bitchy Berta, we've had. So come up with a name that really like resonates for you. Give
Yeah.
that name to the little character. It takes away the power so quickly
Mhm.
from you actually listening to that voice and believing that voice. Then the next one is kickstarting your confidence. So
Mhm.
kickstarting your confidence, which is all about really getting into your confident state. Who do I need to become to create this reality? Right? What do I need to wear? How do I need to show up in the world? How do I stand? How do I walk? Right? Giving yourself a confident playlist. And I
Mhm.
love to always connect to music and a song that is kind of your theme tune for the year, one that you can keep connecting back to, that you feel like, yes, I can do this, like Sia Unstoppable, or one of those really empowering songs that makes you
Yeah.
feel good. And so you can get to that confident state quickly because it only is a frame of mind. It is not, you are not born confident or not
Mhm.
confident. It's
Mhm.
just a feeling that you can generate. So connecting to your confident self, then we start to ask the universe, right? So you ask and receive. And when I say ask, I don't mean actually ask, to be honest. What we like to do is to state and
Mhm.
confidently say what it is that we want to create out loud, always, delusionally. If people say, what are you talking about? But you already are what you want to create, right? So I am a multi-millionaire who changes thousands, hundreds of thousands of women's lives across the globe annually. Okay, if that's what you want. But say it like it's already happened. Say it like
Mhm.
you're already in that identity. And really, when you do that, it's about only talking about what you do want rather than what you don't want. So connecting with that
Awesome.
universe, getting those signs. Then the last two ends is to never stop believing in yourself because you create what you believe. So it's really about going forward with this non-stop belief
Mhm.
in you and what you want to create and just knowing that it is yours
Mhm.
and never give up on your dreams. So never stop believing and never give up because you never know how close you are to that thing actually coming true. So yeah, there's my little 7-step method. And honestly, the transformation that people go through when they start to the end is like Crazy.
Yeah, that's so good. Like it kind of reminds me of my mom. My mother is a pastor, and she preached a message one day, and I never forget this analogy because it really transformed my life. She said that when you're driving your car, to look on your side view mirror, and you know how it says like objects are closer than what it appears, like a safety hazard, right? And she said read that. Like objects are closer than what it appears, and apply that to anything in your life or anything that you want. Like just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. You know,
Yeah.
that it's also closer than what you may think. So you're thinking like, oh, it's gonna take me years, and it may take you 10 days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So true.
yeah.
That's
So
a great analogy. I love that.
yeah, it's a really great analogy. So I actually use that a lot in my discussions because it really transformed how I thought, even at a young age. I think I was
Mm.
12 when I heard that. So it really changed me.
Yeah, wow.
But I
Yeah.
really love that approach because to me, empowerment isn't just, I guess, emotional, like it changes behavior and habits. And I think that when I feel empowered, or maybe some other people will feel empowered in the same way, we are more likely to move our bodies, right?
Yeah.
When we are feeling empowered, we're more capable of taking care of our health, and
Yeah.
pursuing goals that align with our well being. And so I just love that approach. It really resonates with me. I really believe in law of attraction myself. And I have manifested so many things in my life from just stating it like it already has happened. And a lot of my family thought I was crazy when I was sick. I would say it to everyone too. It wasn't just to me. I was saying it to myself, everyone around me, and they're like, oh yeah, whatever. And like, we really did that. Like, yes, I really attracted these things. And I think it's just a really powerful tool to use. Now, I know that many people don't really realize that emotions can be stored in the body. Like, from your experience working with women, how does movement help release those emotional blocks?
Mm. Yeah, I actually, because of the work that I do, right, it's not just law of attraction, fix your mind. We always look at the body at the same time
Right.
because they are one, you know?
Hmm.
And like you said, the emotions are stored in the body. And so whenever we, with my clients, are taking a step forward, like a scary step forward, we will
Hmm.
check in with the body where it feels uncomfortable, right? Where in your body, now I've asked you to take that really bold move towards your dreams, there's a
Hmm.
part of you that's like, I can't
Yeah.
do this. So we do like connect to that part of the body. So we bring a lot of awareness to the body and where those sensations live. And
Hmm.
from there, you can do some great exercises to literally release that feeling in a couple of seconds and really settle your nervous system and get you into a place where you feel happy to move forward and you know what to do to move forward. So it's like placing your awareness and your hands on that part of your body. Maybe it's your stomach that feels the fear, and it's
Hmm.
like asking that part of you, what what are you scared of?
Hmm.
And waiting for the answer.
Yeah.
Asking that part of you, what do you think will happen if I do this? And waiting for the answer. And you can even ask, how old are you? Like, how old is
Hmm.
this part of me that's scared? And when you can feel into that, then you can start to ask, how can we move forward
Hmm.
and do this thing whilst still keeping you happy, you know?
Hmm.
So that bit's not so much movement, but recognizing and tapping into the body.
Hmm.
But at the start of every client session, I will get them to give me their song of the year, and we
Hmm.
will get up and dance. Right? That is the very start of every one of my sessions. We
Yeah.
get up and move the body, like release any of the stress that's been going on in the day, and really just get yourself into the state where you already feel like, yes, like I know what I want to do. I know my
Mhm.
dream is on the way,
Yeah.
and you've released anything that is already been keeping you in this like stuck energy. So
Mm,
yeah, I'm really, really big on getting people to move. And I've actually got a separate framework that I take my clients to for that to get them into a magnetic state as a part of like a daily routine, which is my
mhm.
stars method. So there's always lots of methods going on in my world. I love a methodology.
Yeah, for sure. Me too. What I love about this conversation is how it shows that healing isn't just one dimension, right? Like it's mindset, it could be nervous system regulation, and movement all working together. I think that mind body connection is so powerful. And I know that there's so much research that shows that somatic movement and body awareness can really help regulate the nervous system and release tension patterns that's stored in the fascia and the muscles as well. So it's really a great tool to use. When you talk about helping women reignite their spark, right? So for someone who feels, let's say, disconnected from themselves right now, what's the first step towards rediscovering that spark?
Mm. So I would always say to go back to your childhood.
Yeah.
Get a picture of you as a child before the age of 7, because that is when our subconscious started to fully form and create all of these beliefs that have been holding us back for years. So connect to that younger you before you were 7, the real
Mhm.
authentic you, right? That didn't have the conditioning, that didn't have all of the beliefs that made you feel like you couldn't do the things. And remember what she loved. What did she love to do? What were her favorite Disney films? What were her favorite movies and why? Like,
Mhm.
why particularly did she like those movies? What was her
Mhm.
favorite artist? What was her favorite song? What were her passions? Like, what was she doing most of the time? Maybe she was
Mhm.
roller skating or doing arts and crafts or doing something that you've not done for years. And I
Mhm.
find that that's a lot of the time when people feel lost, is because they've forgotten
Mhm.
genuinely who they are at the core and they've stopped doing the things that they love. And so, really remember who you are, who you were before the conditioning, and start to do some of those things again. And even if you can't remember what little you used to do, follow your curiosity. So if you've seen a dance class pop up, or you've seen an art like a painting class or a pottery workshop or a jewelry making class come up, follow your curiosity and where it takes you, and be aware of your energy when you're in that space. So am I feeling good? Does this
Mhm.
excite me? Or am I feeling a bit low and drained? And that will be a sign as to whether it's meant for you or it's not.
Mhm. I think that's a very important message. I think for me, what I've started to do is on my birthday every year for the last 11 years, I write a letter to my younger self to kind of talk about my year, what happens, and also acknowledging her and what happens in her life, right? And then
Mm,
I consciously do things that my younger self would love to do. So, for example, you mentioned about the favorite movie, that she may like. So my younger self loved Pocahontas. That was my favorite like animated film. And I felt so deeply connected to this amazing film. And there's so many other films as well, but that's one of my favorites.
yeah.
And I remember her just talking to the tree, running through the trees, and where I live, the trees are similar, right? And so every time I look at them, like, I want to run through them. And I never did. And then one day I decided I'm going to run through them and I'm going to try to swing on them. I fell, but it was fun. And then also I want to, dance in the rain. I never went out in the rain and just let the rain fall on me and just dance. And so one day I did. I just walked outside and just felt the rain and I was soaked and I just decided to just let me do a celebratory dance. And I felt so much relief that I didn't even know I was holding on to from just doing that simple movement or release. So I definitely resonate with some of those things that you mentioned because I've also done that and I see the difference in my own life. Now,
Yeah.
your work kind of focuses on helping women create their dream lives, like you mentioned, through alignment and attraction. So, how does embodiment and movement play a role in that manifestation process?
Mm. So you have to get your body on board, right? You have to get your
Right.
body on board all the time with where it is you're going. And um, like I mentioned earlier, if you can shift your body, your mind shifts. You shift your mind,
Yeah.
your body shifts. So
Hmm.
using that connection and really tapping into your theme for the year, right? Your theme for this dream life,
Hmm.
whether it's a few songs, whether it's one song, but really getting into if if and when that happens, when that thing happens, how am I going to be walking down the street?
Yeah.
Right? Am I going to walk differently? Am I going to show up to new environments like networking events differently? So
Hmm.
it's about stepping into like feeling into your body. How would I stand when that's already happened? If that's already here, how would I show up in the world? How
Hmm.
would I move through the world? How would, other people perceive me when I'm showing up
Hmm.
that way?
Yeah.
And uh, if your body's not on board, it's likely one of the things that has been stopping the manifestation from coming to you so quickly, right?
Yeah.
So it is about make checking in with doing that bodily check and say, is there any part of me that still believes this is not possible?
Hmm.
And seeing if there's any sensations that come up. And you can
Hmm.
move through them sensations, right? You can do that little question and exercise, but at the same time, you can just close your eyes and move into your body, like
Hmm.
where that uncomfortability sits.
Hmm.
Twerking and shaking the booty is a really, really good way to release some of that, right? Some of
Yeah.
that trauma stored in the hips.
In the
So
hips.
just
Yeah.
giving yourself a shake and really like releasing
Hmm.
whenever you feel like fearful about taking the next step or, feeling stuck and you're procrastinating, just shake it out. Like the more you shake it out, the quicker you can move on to the next thing and feel comfortable in it.
For sure. I find that so fascinating because embodiment practices help to align the brain and the body.
Hmm.
So when people physically feel confident and grounded, their nervous system shifts into a more creative and expansive state. For those attending the Be Relieved in Motion, what can they expect to learn from your session?
I love how you asked that. So I am a big, big believer in knowledge not being power. Action
Mhm.
is power. Okay, so I will be sharing some of my favorite and best quick tips because I really do believe in making things simple and easy
Mhm.
and things that you can take action on quickly so that you can step into feeling like whatever it is you want to create for yourself, but you can step into that version of you daily
Mhm.
without trying hard, without forcing things, but just feeling like, yeah, I've already got this. And I
Mhm.
can do anything I put my mind to, right? That's the energy that you're going to leave with. And maybe, just maybe, there might be a bit of movement involved as well. But
Ooh.
you'll have to you'll have to show up to see.
I am so excited. I hope so. I'm excited about the movement piece. This is exactly why I even created this event, to help people understand that healing and vitality comes from integrating, mindset, movement, and body awareness together, that it can be fun. Healing can be fun, even though it is some troubling times through unlearning and relearning, we can find some fun. And also, I think it's important, especially for women, to take care of ourselves so that way we can take care of our homes, take care of our children, and kind of show up in the world in our full selves, not reduced or small.
Mm,
There's one message that you'll like people to walk away with about confidence, about movement, and stepping into their power, what would it be?
This is always my number one thing to get you to do, okay? Curate a happy playlist for yourself. One that only makes you feel good, only brings up good memories, only, reminds you of those days when you were 18 and in the club and shaking it with your girls, right? Put together a playlist of all your favorite songs, maybe your Disney songs, but something that really makes you you in a playlist and play it every single day. Whether you're doing chores around the house, whether you're going for a walk, whatever you do, start your day with this happy playlist. And not only will you connect to your like authentic self, but you will raise your vibration and feel into this light, carefree, really present, conscious energy where you're out of your mind and you can just get on with your day without overthinking things and you can actually just feel good. The energy, if you start your day with that, honestly, I do it every single day. My happy playlist is on every single day. And you will notice these like magical little signs and synchronicities popping up in your world when you can start your day the way that feels like you and on the highest vibration that you can be on.
Wow, that's such a powerful reminder. And I'm going to do it as well. I have a happy playlist,
Yes.
but I do not play it every day. And I don't really play it to like jumpstart my day. So I'm definitely going to do that starting tomorrow.
Yes. Love,
Actually,
love, love,
great.
love.
That's so awesome. When people combine empowering mindset with intentional movement, they can transform both their mental and physical well being. And for anyone listening, you can join us this Sunday, March 15th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our free Zoom event. It's called Be Relieved in Motion, the Healing Power of Movement, where Karys and other incredible experts will be sharing even more insights, including yours truly, Ashley Nicole. Karys, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I love this conversation, and I love how this conversation highlights the powerful connection between movement, mindset, and emotional healing. It's just been such a pleasure. I feel like I'm so happy I met you. You're like my little angel on the side of my shoulder. You're saying all the things that I connect with. That's just so awesome. I think it's great to connect with people who have like minds or are on journeys of healing that you can learn from. And so I
Yeah.
just want to thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. From a health science perspective, we know that when people combine intentional movement, nervous system regulation, and empowering beliefs, they can create profound changes in both their physical and mental well being. And that's exactly why I created this event. So if you enjoyed this conversation and want to go deeper, I invite you to join us for our upcoming free online summit. It's called Be Relief in Motion, once again, the healing power of movement. It's on March 15th, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it's live on Zoom. And during this event, you'll learn from experts in movement therapy, somatic awareness, dance, dance medicine, because it is a medicine as well, and physical rehabilitation as well. And it's all focused on helping you integrate mindful movement into your daily life for greater vitality, for emotional balance, even, and mental clarity. Karys will be one of our featured speakers, along with other incredible experts, sharing tools you can start using right away. So make sure to reserve your free spot now and join us live. I'll put the link down in the description below. And thank you again, Karys, for being here and sharing your wisdom. And thank you to everyone watching. We look forward to seeing you at the event. Let us know when you get there that you watched this episode and you're here from that. All right. Talk to you guys later. Thank you so much.
Thank you.